Today I'm going to prove to you that psychology is a religion. And not only a religion, but a religion that comes from devils. Now, in order to prove that it's a religion, I think that we should look no further than some of the men who helped create psychology. I have here a letter between Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud, in which Carl Jung admits that psychology is a religion. He literally calls it that. And the context for this letter is basically Freud was trying to get Carl Jung to join this atheistic fraternity that was trying to overthrow Christianity. But Carl Jung said that said order could never overthrow Christianity because they have nothing to replace Christianity. So this order was doomed to die out. So Jung says religion can be replaced only by religion. So he starts out by saying that in order to knock off Christianity, you'd have to offer some alternative worldview, some alternative religion. Is there perchance a new savior in the international order? What sort of new myth does he hand out for us to live by? Only the wise are ethical from sheer intellectual presumption. The rest of us need the eternal truth of myth. You will see from this string of associations that the problem does not leave me simply apathetic and cold. The ethical problem of sexual freedom really is enormous and worth the sweat of all noble souls. But 2,000 years of Christianity have to be replaced by something equivalent. An ethical fraternity with its mystical nothing, not infused by any archaic, infantile driving force, is a pure vacuum and can never evoke in man the slightest trace of that age-old animal power which drives the migrating bird across the sea and without which no irresistible mass movement can come into being. I imagine a far finer and more comprehensive task for psychoanalysis than alliance with an ethical fraternity. I think we must give it time to infiltrate into people from many centers, to revivify among intellectuals a feeling for symbol and myth, ever so gently to transform Christ back into the soothsaying God of the vine, which he was, and in this way absorb those ecstatic instinctual forces of Christianity for the one purpose of making the cult and the sacred myth what they once were, a drunken feast of joy where man regained the ethos and holiness of an animal. That indeed was the beauty and purpose of classical religion, which from God knows what temporary biological needs has turned into a misery institute. Yet how much infinitely much rapture and wantonness lie dormant in our religion, waiting to be led back to their true destination. So right there, he just said psychology is a religion. And here was his little plot all laid out in order to overthrow Christianity with said religion. And he says, essentially, that you need psychology to infiltrate into all these different groups over a long period of time in order to get people to view things in allegory, so Christianity might be destroyed. Now, we'll come back to that topic later on in the video. Since we've now proved that psychology itself is a religion, now I'd like to prove that it is a religion of devils. Psychology is the study of consciousness. Now, consciousness is an occultic, satanic doctrine. Many people believe that they are conscious, but that is not the case. What you have is a soul. Consciousness and the soul are two very different things. In essence, the soul is the man himself. The man is real, he is accountable, and he's not some mental construct that can be swept away or knocked over with the slightest decision. According to consciousness, man does not truly exist. Consciousness reduces the man to this mental creation, a mask, if you will, and says that the man is separate from the awareness itself, which is not true. The man and the awareness are the same thing. You are a living soul. You are not consciousness. So you can already see how consciousness reduces the man and changes what he is by his very nature of existence. And this is purposeful because, as I said, consciousness comes from occultism. And in occultism, they teach, just as the psychologists do, that the man does not truly exist, but rather only the consciousness does. And they say that this is the case so they can teach that all of reality, all matter, everything is conscious. So they can say that it's all one consciousness that exists, because they want to teach that reality does not actually exist and you're not real. They just want to teach that they are God. That is the method for which they achieve this goal. And since psychology is the study of consciousness, and consciousness comes from a occultic religion, it should be no surprise that the two founders of psychology, the people who had the most influence on the field of study, were occultists. Sigmund Freud was a Kabbalistic Jew, and Carl Jung, this dude, if you just read any of his work, the guy's babbling on about Gnosticism or alchemy or any other occultic nonsense you can find. This guy has written plenty of books proving that psychology comes from occultism. Psychology is just satanic Gnosticism repackaged and labeled science. Occultists have always labeled what they teach as science. Some might object to this, though, and say that, well, psychology does not teach that all of reality is consciousness like the mystics do. And I'd counter and say that this is because they do not have their unified theory of consciousness yet. And if you go and look at any of these psychological journals, they'll tell you that they are in the search of it. And since consciousness at its core really just is this occultic doctrine, they would have to somehow prove scientifically how all of matter, all of reality is inherently conscious. And they're actually attempting to do this right now through quantum physics. Now, again, I'm just going to let these people speak for themselves, and I'm going to show you how these people openly declare how Kabbalah, occultic mysticism, and quantum physics are teaching the exact same thing.
I'm a theoretical physicist, and I like to say that I walk in the footsteps of giants like Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. I'm not a philosopher. However, I am rather dazzled by the fact that many of the basic mysteries that we find in string theory and the theory of everything seem to be mirrored in the Zohar and in the Kabbalah.
As a scholar, the most amazing thing of all is the degree to which modern astrophysics sounds like a Kabbalistic text.
They are currently attempting to make quantum physics and quantum mechanics more mainstream so more people will draw this conclusion, the same conclusion that they have come to, that all of reality is conscious. And when this happens, you're going to see them announce that they have their unified theory of consciousness. They're going to come out and say, all matter is conscious. All of reality has consciousness. Another satanic doctrine that psychology teaches is that of the divine feminine and the divine masculine. In occultism, these two things are usually connected to energy. They are energies that you access through personality traits. If you're more loving, they'd say that you have more feminine energy, or if you're more disagreeable and headstrong, they'd say that you have more masculine energy. But the problem with what psychology teaches is not the energy aspect of this doctrine. They don't even touch on that. The problem is is saying that there are male personality traits and female personality traits, and that these things are inherent to human beings. They teach that if you have female personality traits, i.e., being more loving, kind, gentle, that makes you more feminine, personality wise. So, according to them, being loving quite literally makes you effeminate. Now, all we have to do is just put 2 seconds of thought into this and think, wait a second, Jesus Christ was loving. That would mean that Jesus is effeminate, according to this doctrine, and that we believe in a effeminate, androgynous God. According to the Bible, being effeminate is not a personality trait. No, it's acting physically like a woman. It's not about being more loving or about being more of a pushover. It's about men wanting to be used sexually as women by other men. That is what being effeminate is. And then they go and try and talk like women. It is a physical thing. It is not a mental thing. But according to psychology, everyone is inherently effeminate in one way or another because they have some sort of female personality trait within them. Going further than that, Carl Jung literally just taught openly that everyone was mentally androgynous because you have a female personality, a miniature female personality loaded into the back of your mind as a man, and vice versa as a woman. So he just openly taught that everyone was a mental hermaphrodite, mentally androgynous. So yet again, you see how psychology inherently changes what a man even is. Now, going back to Carl Jung's letter from earlier, he said that in order to overthrow Christianity, psychology needed to infiltrate many people over all of these different intellectual groups over a long period of time. And he said that by doing this, it would give them a new feeling for symbol and myth, and that would be the ultimate destruction of Christianity. And that essentially means that if you believe in psychology, you will have a better understanding of allegory. Now, what psychology teaches is that Christianity is all just a bunch of mental allegories. That is what Jordan Peterson teaches, and that is what Carl Jung taught. That is what all of these different psychological frauds will try and glean from the Bible. They want the allegorical psychological truths instead of just believing the written word for what it says. Yeah, Christ literally rose from the dead. Christ was literally God. It is not a metaphor. It is not an allegory. But yet again, this is a result of the occultic origins of psychology. Because according to the occultists, you need to read the Bible through a bunch of allegories, because Jesus Christ was not literally the one and only true God. No, that's just an allegory. That's just an allegory for Christ consciousness. He was just an avatar or whatever kind of nonsense they want to teach. The very core tenets of psychology are actively detrimental to Christianity. And if people adhere to these tenets, it will overthrow Christianity. You cannot have this psychological Gnosticism and Christianity at the same time. These two things are like oil and water. They do not mix. So I hope that this has given you a better understanding of psychology, and I hope that you've realized that psychology is actually just a religion of devils. And we should not be going to these psychologists in order to fix up our lives. We don't need their philosophy, because their philosophy comes from Gnosticism. We need nothing to do with what they're teaching.